What happens when you choose solitude over society? There comes a moment when the noise becomes too much. Not the literal noise of car horns, phones buzzing, or crowded rooms, but the deeper noise. The noise of opinions, expectations, competition, comparison. The kind of noise that drowns out your inner voice and makes you forget what your own thoughts sound like. And in that moment, you feel it, a pull. A quiet tug from something ancient and sacred. Solitude. Not loneliness, not isolation, but a conscious, courageous choice to step away. To disconnect from the world not because you hate it, but because you need to remember who you are without it. When you choose solitude over society, something shifts. The world doesn't stop spinning, but your relationship to it changes. And what unfolds inside of you is something society rarely encourages, but the soul desperately craves. In the world we live in, being constantly surrounded by people, content, and stimulation is considered normal, even necessary. Social lives are monetized. Opinions are tweeted before they're processed. There's a cultural obsession with being seen, liked, heard, validated. But here's the paradox. The more connected we become, the more disconnected we often feel. Disconnected from our own inner world. Disconnected from our values. Disconnected from silence, slowness, and stillness. And so, the idea of solitude becomes terrifying to most people, because it means facing the parts of ourselves we've drowned in noise. But for those who choose it, solitude is not a punishment. It's a return to what is real, a return to the self. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, often wrote in his private journal about the need to retreat inward. He ruled an empire, but knew that true command began with mastering the mind. He wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." And so, the question becomes, what actually happens when you choose that retreat? First, you begin to feel again. Not just the surface-level emotions that get stirred up by daily irritations, but the deeper layers: grief you buried, joy you forgot, fears you ignored, dreams you dismissed. Solitude removes the distractions that numb you. And in doing so, it asks you to feel what's real. This can be uncomfortable at first. When you sit alone in a quiet room with no phone, no TV, no conversation to escape into, you meet yourself in raw form. Your insecurities surface. Your regrets whisper. Your ego begins to panic. It says, "Why aren't you being productive? Why aren't you doing something useful? Why aren't you talking to anyone?" But this is the first test of solitude. Learning to endure your own presence. And once you pass it, you begin to discover that the discomfort was only the gateway. What lies beyond it is clarity. You start to see your life more clearly. What you've been tolerating, what's been draining you, which voices in your head are actually yours, and which belong to your parents, your peers, or the culture you've absorbed. Solitude reveals truth, sometimes painful, always liberating. You also begin to notice how much of your identity was shaped by others. How often you acted a certain way to fit in, please someone, avoid rejection, or gain approval. How much of your life has been performative. Society, in many ways, teaches you to curate an identity, but solitude invites you to shed it. It asks, who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when there's no audience to perform for? The answers to those questions aren't always immediate. In fact, at first, they can be disorienting. You might feel lost, uncertain, like a fog has lifted only to reveal how far you've drifted from your center. But that's where the journey begins, not with clarity, but with the courage to sit in the fog until it clears. And when it does, you begin to move through life differently. Your decisions become quieter, but firmer. You stop explaining yourself. You stop chasing things that once felt urgent. You become less interested in convincing others and more interested in knowing yourself. Because solitude has taught you that peace is not found in applause, achievement, or affirmation. It's found in alignment. And alignment doesn't require permission. But solitude isn't just a psychological shift. It also creates a sacred space for creativity, insight, and spiritual expansion. Some of the world's greatest thinkers, writers, and artists have credited solitude for their breakthroughs. Thoreau retreated to the woods. Nietzsche walked for hours alone. Virginia Woolf wrote about the necessity of a room of one's own. And even the Buddha reached enlightenment alone under a tree. Because when the world quiets down, your imagination wakes up, your thoughts stretch beyond the habitual loops. Your intuition sharpens, you stop consuming so much, and begin creating from within. This isn't about escaping the world forever. It's about returning to it with something real to offer. Something that wasn't borrowed, mimicked, or algorithm approved. Society often praises productivity, but solitude cultivates originality. And in a world starving for authenticity, that is a gift worth giving. That said, choosing solitude doesn't come without a price. You will be misunderstood. People will wonder why you're pulling away. Some will assume you're angry. Others will project their own discomfort onto your quietness. They might say you've changed, as if that's a bad thing. But growth always disrupts familiarity. When you stop dancing to the noise, it throws off those who are still dancing. And that's okay. Because solitude is not about proving anything to anyone. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. It's not antisocial, it's deeply pro-self. And when practiced with intention, solitude doesn't make you hard or distant, it makes you whole. It allows you to re-enter society not as a fractured version of yourself, but as someone who has gone inward, listened deeply, and come back grounded. You don't lose your humanity in solitude. You find it. Eventually, something beautiful happens. You stop fearing being alone. It no longer feels like a void, it feels like a sanctuary. A place you can return to anytime, to reconnect with what matters. And because you're no longer afraid of being alone, you're no longer desperate for company. You no longer tolerate shallow relationships just to fill space. You no longer people please just to feel accepted. You become more selective, not out of arrogance, but out of reverence for your peace. This changes everything. You speak less, but your words carry more weight. You do less, but your actions have more meaning. You give less of your energy away, but when you do give, it's pure. That's what happens when you choose solitude over society. Not to reject the world, but to return to it with deeper presence, clarity, and strength. In a world that screams for attention, the person who can be alone without collapsing is powerful. They're not running from life. They're rooted in it. They don't need to constantly share, post, or perform. Their presence speaks for itself. Because they've tasted something society rarely offers: stillness, wholeness, truth. And once you've felt that, even for a moment, you'll never again confuse noise for meaning. You'll never again chase what doesn't nourish your soul. You'll know the difference between connection and dependence, between fitting in and belonging, between being liked and being free. That's the quiet revolution of solitude. And it starts the moment you stop fearing the silence and start listening to what it has to say.